Hello and welcome. My name is Absolute Habibi, a community ambassador for Europa Universalis 5. In this after-action review, we'll go on a journey playing as Byzantium, the primary focus of the upcoming EU5 DLC, Fate of the Phoenix, coming out on May 6. Through the gameplay showcased in this video, you'll see firsthand some of the unique content for Byzantium in this DLC, as well as many new features as part of the free EU5 1.2 patch, launching on the same day. There are multiple paths now as Byzantium in EU5, from Hellenism to Latin revival, but in this playthrough, we will go down the traditional Eastern Roman path, restoring the Orthodox Pentarchy, mending the Schism, and showing the unique way Byzantium can reform the Roman Empire. Before I begin, I should mention that the build I played for this AAR is on a pre-release build, meaning some of the events and features might be adjusted or changed on release. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. The challenge of Byzantium in EU5 lies primarily in its starting economic and governmental positions. Not only do we start in debt, we also have substantial amount of inflation and many negative estate privileges and laws that prevent us from increasing our taxable income from our estates. If you played Byzantium before this DLC, many of these estate privileges look familiar, but are reworked or modified to work with the other content and hurdles that Byzantium now gets, such as bureaucracies. As Byzantium, you start with 4 unique ones that you can remove, change, or upgrade later through events or successfully completing the Fate of the Phoenix disaster. Each one represents bureaucratic institutions within the nation. Byzantium starts with 4 of these bureaucracies already instated in 1337. No matter what, as long as you have the bureaucracy instated, you always get the modifier shown in the middle. If you decide to invest into a bureaucracy by paying monthly ducats into it, you can also get access to another positive modifier on the right, scaled by how much you invest into it. On the other hand, failing to invest into a bureaucracy gives negative effects, scaled up by how little you invest in it, as seen on the left. All 3 of these modifiers are further increased by another mechanic called Bureaucratic Entrenchment. The longer a particular bureaucracy is in effect, the more entrenched it gets as part of the nation, making it harder to remove or replace later in terms of stability cost. Furthermore, entrenchment increases or decreases estate equilibrium depending on if a given estate likes or hates this bureaucracy. There's no way to directly reduce entrenchment outside of parliament actions, agendas, and events. However, you can speed up or slow down bureaucratic entrenchment with cabinet actions. In my experience, it can be worth investing in these bureaucracies early on before they get too expensive due to rampant inflation, increased entrenchment, and scaling economic base cost. Speaking of rampant inflation, I opted to slow the economic bleeding by just keeping the inflation slider maxed out. For now, inflation is just a number since it's not like I was able to build anything anyways. To top it all off, we had 2 starting disasters that we had to deal with. The new Fate of the Phoenix disaster, and the older Byzantium succession crisis disaster. On a positive note, Byzantium starts with 4 cabinet slots and a crown head of cabinet. However, I couldn't afford any new cabinet members just yet, and chose legitimacy, stability, reduce war exhaustion, and encourage communalism for my actions. I felt that communalism was especially beneficial with this start, simply for the reduced stability from revoking privileges, which we will eventually have to do. I was not actually at a negative 40 balance, my income readjusted on the first month tick, but even so, I was in a negative balance for a good amount of this start, even with maxed out inflation. My plan here was to pray for some good RNG and do quick successive wars to fuel our early game economy until we can get a positive balance. I also improved relations with the Pope, which will make sense in a bit. And finally, I released as many Pronoia subjects as possible in our non-core and unintegrated lands. Vassal meta did get nerfed quite a bit in patch 1.2, but this unique subject type for Byzantium gives 0.01 legitimacy per subject. This might not seem like much, but every point of legitimacy counts for this start. This is also a good time to highlight a new 1.2 feature coming in the free patch, which is the Events tab. This tab shows all possible dynamic historic events for your tag and their triggers, making it easier to experience all your nation has to offer. And when the first month ticked, I triggered my first disaster, the Fate of the Phoenix. This disaster increases mercenary costs and CB creation speed, as well as reduces the cost of bureaucratic sliders. It has multiple actions, each costing 5 legitimacy to use, including an event where we can ask the Pope for some money. However, they cannot be our enemy or rival. To end this disaster successfully, we need to own or our subjects own at least 150 locations and the rise of the Turk situation to be over. To make the rise of the Turk situation end, we need to fully annex all eligible Turkish beyliks, or no Turkish beylik should have more than 100 locations by 1401. The Byzantines also have a new societal value that plays a role in the shape of their nation: the Latinitas versus the Romanimos societal value. Whether to look west in Italian republics and Frankish courts for support, or continue the path of unbroken Roman inheritance through the Orthodox faith and imperial institutions. Going towards the Latinitas allows you to unlock the Legionnaires unique unit, which upgrades in all ages, as well as start a Latin revival movement. Certain disaster actions and events can push us in either way, but the static modifiers to move in either direction are determined by the culture of our ruler, our court language, religion, and the makeup of pops in our nation. Back to the gameplay, and a couple months in, and I got the second disaster, the Byzantine succession crisis. In my opinion, this disaster is not too bad, as it allows you to use prestige instead of legitimacy to give estate privileges, and we had no legitimacy. But at the same time, an Epirate pretender rose. This eventually can cause a civil war in Epirus that can lead to them no longer being my vassal, so I had to keep my eye on them or risk losing them. And it wouldn't be real Byzantine gameplay without getting 2 disease outbreaks in the first couple months of the game. At least my starting sickly emperor is not dead yet. At least Constantinople is a very stable and sturdy city. Well, that chain of events made my economy go from bad to absolutely bleak, but I still had one more trick up my sleeve. I can beg the Pope for money since he didn't rival me, and I've been improving relations. And he accepts. That's the only sign I need. This is the run. The Phoenix rises. With this money, I did not repay debt immediately, as the states might be broker than me and give no more loan money, so we kept it as a war chest. Got an event that made one of our bad government reforms into a good one, getting an extra cabinet slot. With that cabinet slot, we can use one of the new cabinet actions as part of the Fate of the Phoenix disaster that I got earlier for an extra 5% research speed. And then I made a CB on the Ottomans. As the Byzantines, it's conquest or fall, or in this case, conquest or go bankrupt. Genoa then stole one of my islands without my consent, but I didn't care as that's wealth I wasn't taxing, therefore making my bureaucracies more expensive. And speaking of bureaucracies, it was time for my first parliament, so that meant turning up the Imperial Senate to 100% for the 17.5 base parliament backing. I wanted to change the law, and the law was the Pronoia system, the law that gave us the unique subjects we used earlier. The problem? This law gives -10 max tax, which is brutal. The Pronoias we made earlier will remain, but we won't be making any more anytime soon. While waiting for our Reconquest CB on the Ottomans, we made another CB on the Carasids. The money from the Pope is running out, and soon we'll have to take loans. However, we get an event to ask Venice for a massive loan, and in return, use the jewels of our crown as collateral. I choose to do this as 1,000 ducats will give massive leeway and avoid bankruptcy. But that doesn't mean we're buddies with Venice. When given the option to give trade privileges to Genoa or Venice, I chose neither. Rome has no use for merchants. But then Venice backstabbed me and cancelled our agreement and stole my jewels. It wasn't time to reminisce on our stolen priceless crown jewels. It was time for our first expansion, and against the Ottomans. But I didn't go across the strait. If there's anything my 7,438 hours of EU4 taught me, it's to let them cross first. And as predicted, they crossed the strait, straight into my trap. That was the entire Ottoman and Carasid armies stack wiped in one go. All the while, I barely lost any levies, meaning I can easily fight more wars after this one. In the midst of all the glory, the Age of Renaissance began. I chose the administrative focus for the Deus Vult CB, stability gain, and the proximity speed. We get a really strong CB when we come out of the Fate of the Phoenix disaster. However, before then, we need a reliable way of starting wars after reclaiming our lost cores outside of no CBing and Parliament, as I'll need every Parliament to ask for extra taxes from the estates to avoid bankruptcy. To maximize the gold from war, I went around the Ottomans' forts by sea to siege the Karamanids in order to demand max money and war reps from them as well. With the Ottoman capital siege, we can now piece them out, taking back just our cores, as I don't want to take too much unintegrated land just yet, as we have a succession civil war brewing back home. Winning against the Ottomans gave us increased integration speed, as long as I am over 50 legitimacy for 30 years. The succession war fires, which also ends the succession crisis. Unfortunately, the rebels got 2 forts from the civil war, but we can hopefully avoid sieging them by sieging everything else first. The conquest of Nicomedia fires the Nicomedia reclaimed Fate of the Phoenix event. We get a choice of either estate loyalty and 0.3 legitimacy a month, or gaining a cabinet seat for 20 years. This was a hard choice, but the legitimacy in our situation is amazing, as we can cut costs further and remove the privileges we wanted sooner. Our money situation was tough once again, and we were on the brink of taking loans. So we asked the Pope, but this time, he declined. We demanded tribute from Bailics and requested additional taxes from the estates, keeping us afloat just a bit longer. We had to keep fighting, and Bulgaria was our next target. Then, it was the Aidenids. Taking land and money from everyone we fought. But could I really outrun this debt and this wretched balance? Smyrna was reclaimed, giving us the option to build a shipyard there or max level merchant quarters. I chose the merchant quarters as that would be 10 levels, hoping the trade would help. We followed that with another war, this time on Serbia. With every victorious battle, our generals' skills improved, but our debt did not. But while in the war with Serbia, Bulgaria joins a revolt against my subject, which may seem bad, but we dismantled Bulgaria's forts in the last peace deal. Maybe if we fully siege them quickly, our subject would take max money? My assumption was correct, netting us another 150 ducats in the bank. As we started a war with the Mentesids, the Black Death came in full force. However, we were not in the best position to react to it. I needed 95 legitimacy to remove our bad estate privileges, and I needed the stability as well to be able to remove them all. So for now, my only act was to do the Expel the Sick action, as it's the option that gives the most monthly communalism gain. At this point, I was hoping my next parliament could save me. And there it was, balance the budget. The best RNG for Parliament, given I was now at 50% inflation. I also used this Parliament to request additional taxes again, getting a positive balance for the first time in a while. By 1354, I was at 900 ducats of debt. I had completely abandoned my bureaucracies and was still at a balance of -5 ducats a month. With not many wars to keep doing at this point until we get the Deus Vult CB, and still a bit away from 95 legitimacy, I needed to change another law. I used my next parliament to change our favor the ruler law to favor the wealthy, just so we can tax the nobles 10% more. Our last target to reclaim Khorasan was Genoa, who luckily was allied to 2 landlocked nations. If I could get on the war goal, I could potentially get our cores and maybe some money. I took the gamble that Genoa's allies would not get military access. My gamble paid off, and I was able to secure Genoa's islands and some money. In 1357, I hit 95 legitimacy, meaning it's time to finally remove some bad privileges. However, I did not have enough stability to remove all privileges, as the nobility had too much power, so I opted to remove the privileges on the burghers, clergy, and commoners, leaving the nobility one for later. Finally, I was making a positive balance without parliament extra taxes, and it was just in time as I was literally 1 loan away from bankruptcy. Meanwhile, the Karamanid's were getting too big for my liking, so I used the Deus Vult CB to get a claim, which I would use to threaten war later. Luckily, we got balanced the budget again in our parliament, and used it plus additional taxes from the states to fully pay off our debt. This kind of situation, the extra parliament time from Imperial Senate's neutral bonus really is helpful, as we can maintain active parliament bonuses for almost double the normal amount of time. 1360, we were finally debt-free. But we were still at 82% inflation, which was going to take longer to get rid of. We won another war against the Turkish Beyliks, and now it was time to focus on our economy. But now with our borders looking better, I thought it would be appropriate to change a game rule. There we go. Much better. Our economic buildup in this period was just focused around our capital, making the most valuable buildings for now just to boost taxable income while reducing inflation as much as possible. Did I say no wars? I actually meant no Ottomans. Now we can have peace in our time. Did I say no wars? Actually, I meant no Bulgaria. Now we can have peace in our time. And with the money from these peaceful wars, we made our first local governor in Thessaloniki, increasing our proximity substantially. Did I say no more wars? Okay, I think you get it. The conquest never stops as the Eastern Roman Empire. It's conquer or fall. Funny enough, in this war, we got balanced the budget again. Due to our rampant inflation from our early game, I took this every time it popped up, and thanks to the Imperial Senate bureaucracy, we just increased bureaucratic spending momentarily and are able to always request additional taxes while having it pass. As a matter of fact, I think about 90% of the parliaments in this campaign, I requested additional taxes from the estates. This created an effect of rapid economic expansion in short one-year bursts, while slow economic growth for the other 4. We built our second local governor in Ankara, since even as the Eastern Roman Empire, we can use and expand the Seljuk Mint building in Ikonon. This building gives plus 20 proximity source per level and has a max level of 4, acting as a more expensive local governor that does not impact your local governor pool. And before you ask, you can't stack Seljuk mints with local governors. This is now a good time to talk about the new mechanics for Orthodox, part of the Rise of the Phoenix DLC. Now owning one of the 5 Pentarchy cities such as Constantinople or Alexandria gives a unique global bonus to your nation, and getting all 5 doubles the bonuses of all Pentarchy cities. Additionally, there are some new actions you can spend religious influence on, such as Loan Icon, which allows you to get money for lending a religious icon work of art, and the Invite Patriarch Delegation, which gives multiple unique actions similar to the Orthodox Synod action. And unique to Byzantium and the DLC, you can reestablish Hellenism at the cost of 50 stability and 100 religious influence if you own all Hellenic holy sites and are either 90 or negative 90 of the new Byzantium societal value. We won't be exploring Hellenism in this campaign, but this is how you would go Hellenism if that's what you wish to do in your Byzantium campaign. Back to the gameplay in 1390, it was finally time to remove our last bad privilege. To make it cheaper, I fully invested in the Themata and Books of Basilica bureaucracies, since Themata will reduce the power of the nobility, and Books of Basilica decreases the power of all estates. I also reformed the military twice in the Fate of the Phoenix disaster window. Reforming through this window enough times, and the Themata bureaucracy will upgrade when the disaster ends successfully. Next, I did a simple war against the Kendarids, fully annexing them, leaving only Karamanids and Artukids as valid Turkish beyliks for the Rise of Turk situation. Though, obviously, I was not concerned about either one, as neither was even close to owning 100 locations, and the end date of the disaster is coming up in 1401. We then followed this with another pure economic build-up period, which was tough considering we still had 47% inflation in 1399. But our maritime presence was going up, so we were slowly becoming richer through control and bursts of buildup using parliament extra taxes. In 1401, since no Turkish beylik owned more than 100 locations, the Rise of the Turk situation ends, also successfully ending our Phoenix Rises disaster, rewarding us with multiple bonuses, from gaining a new very powerful CB to restore the Roman borders, which has 50% antagonism and war score reduction attached to it, just limited to the highlighted area shown on this map. Pretty modest, as well as giving us a nice military buff for the next 20 years, permanent 10% cabinet efficiency, and 2 new bureaucracies that we can use. With the disaster out of the way, the Phoenix surges from the ashes, strong and ready to conquer Roman borders. My goals in this point of the campaign were to conquer the 5 Pentarchy cities, do the Mend the Schism action, and to reform the Roman Empire, which in this patch Byzantium exclusively has different requirements, only requiring the city of Rome and 75 locations in the Italian region to reform. To achieve this goal, we would need a large standing army, and the Thema headquarters are not enough. Luckily, we're one advance away from armories. This brings us to the next 1.2 free patch feature, Urban Rights. Urban Rights are location-based bonuses that you can place in any urban location. You unlock more types of urban rights and more per location as the game goes on. But Byzantium has some unique ones tied to the Rise of the Phoenix DLC that they can use in their cities and megalopoli, such as the one that increases fine cloth, regular cloth, and silk output, which we just put on Constantinople. For generic ones that all nations get in the free DLC, there are only 2 you start with many more unlocked through advances that I'll demonstrate later in the video. I chose Prusa to get the stable port urban right, which is a generic one, to gain more harbor capacity in that location. But back to gameplay, with this new CB and the belligerent societal value, you can go absolutely crazy in expansion. So it's time for me to use it in this campaign. And yes, I did push the belligerent societal value beforehand. First I started with Karaman. Then it was Athens. Then the Balkans. Then the Eretnids. Yeah, the CB is pretty strong. Let's go a little back in time before the map painting, as I actually removed a couple bureaucracies. When a bureaucracy gets really entrenched, its costs become enormous compared to their benefit. At first, I was contemplating removing honorary titles and replacing it with Kefalia, which gives a governor and cabinet seat. But I was worried that over time, as the bureaucracy got entrenched, I would have to spend a lot of money just to maintain that extra local governor. And even though the extra bonus of honorary titles is probably one of the worst for the cost, giving some estate satisfaction, the neutral bonus with no investment of cabinet efficiency is nice. The negative bonus of increased estate dissatisfaction from low legitimacy is negligible if you stay near 100 legitimacy. So I decided to keep honorary titles. Thamara, on the other hand, had one of the worst negative malices of increased nobility power, and investing in it to get fort defense just did not make sense given our expansionist position, so I removed it despite its stability cost. For now, I was going to keep this bureaucracy slot empty to focus on economy, as there's no negative effects of having an empty available bureaucracy slot. For my Age of Discovery focus, we're going to fight some big nations such as the Mamluks and Naples, so I chose the military focus for its wide array of military and naval buffs. In 1441, we unlocked the local council building, new to the free 1.2 patch. This building gives local max control, upgrades in later ages, and is quite expensive, so I wasn't able to immediately get a lot of them. Next, I gave another city an urban right, this time on Ankara, giving it the Imperial Breadbasket, a unique urban right for Byzantium that gives pop growth. In 1449, I decided it was time to remove the Imperial Senate bureaucracy. Although this bureaucracy helped me a lot in the early game by giving me easy parliaments to pass and extended parliament times for all the balance the budget parliaments, it was starting to get massively entrenched, requiring huge amounts of investments at all time to negate its legitimacy negative effect. Without the weight of the Thamara and Imperial Senate, our economy was in much better position for rapid growth. And that brings us back to when I was fighting Eretnids in the blobbing montage earlier. This was the first war where I was using a purely professional army, and by chance, we got the event unlocking a new military bureaucracy, the Stratigarchia bureaucracy, which gives army and navy tradition as a constant effect, and general plus admiral ability and military tactics as a positive effect. I immediately took this bureaucracy as it will allow us to punch above our weight with better leaders and reduce damage to both armies and navies, as military tactics does impact both. From the Retinids I took Sivas, giving us access to another Seljuk mint at max level, increasing our control over the entirety of Anatolia. Next on the Roman expansion chopping block is our old ally Trebizond. Although Trebizond is small, I do have to siege multiple forts with the new city wall building. This building doesn't increase fort level, but does increase garrison size, making it nearly impossible to assault without multiple breaches. While seizing Trebizond's mountain forts, I unlocked more urban rights. These urban rights are generic and available to all nations as part of the free 1.2 patch. These rights allow you to specialize towns and cities further. For example, Athena is a great location for tools since there's an iron RGO in the province. So, I made it even better for tools by giving it the tools urban right for 5 legitimacy, increasing tools output by 30% while decreasing overall production efficiency by 5%. I will spread these out in different specialized locations based off the RGOs in the provinces, like giving textile rights in Iconion because it has a silk and cotton RGO in the same province. And for the first time ever, I saw an AI Naples form Sardinia. I didn't even know that was possible before this campaign. In 1484, I surpassed Sardinia as the naval hegemon, which meant it was time to make our opening in Italy. In 1487, we declared the war and immediately engaged in naval battles. Despite my better tactics and morale, Sardinia's navy won the initial engagements. But then I locked the Sardinian navy in a trap. I retreated anytime one of my boats was near sinking and sent in a fresh navy, completely wiping a Sardinian heavy ship stack. I repeated the same maneuver again, and made my opening for a naval landing. The Sardinian army was waiting for us on the coast, but our Roman men were not afraid. We went for it anyways, securing the passages with my battered heavy ships. We did an amphibious assault, outmatching Sardinia's troops despite taking a battle malice on landing. The plan? Siege all the way to Rome and capture it in this war. The forts in the interior were unmanned due to labor shortages. The Italians had all become burghers, and when we sieged Sardinia's capital, Rome was just a stone's throw away. We had withered their army to 5,000 troops from 172,000, all while not losing a single land battle. And after successfully besieging most of Sardinia, we took all of Sardinia's holdings in Greece and the Balkans, and the provinces of Rome and Campania. Immediately I built a naval governor in Rome. Our old capital was reclaimed. Now it was time to punish Venice, as they still had our jewels, costing us minus 0.1 legitimacy every month. They will pay. My ruler had such a deep hate for Venice that he wrote a strategicon on how to defeat them. Everyone in the military read it, especially the heavy infantry. We declared war on Venice to restore the Roman borders, and more importantly, to get back our jewels. We had to sink Venice's navy first, which surprisingly was harder than expected, losing many boats in the process. Then I sieged their isolated ally Genoa first, taking from them Corsica. Next was Venice itself. I would burn the entire city to the ground if it meant finding my jewels. And once it was besieged, I could take Venice for myself. We burnt the city to the ground, and we found my jewels. We converted Rome to the true faith, giving a global malus to all Catholic nations of minus convergence speed and minus tolerance of true faith. Meanwhile, giving me tolerance of true faith and monthly religious influence for the rest of the game. And then an earthquake hit Constantinople. Then the Black Death appeared in the bottom half of my nation, right where my invasion force for the Mamluks was standing. But we declared war nonetheless. They engaged us almost immediately, like they were waiting for us. We won the battle and assaulted towards Antioch. We skirmished back and forth on the border, but in the end, the only troops left standing were Roman. And after a grueling push that killed nearly 1 million pops on both sides, but mostly on Mamluk's side, we got the peace deal, getting all the Pentarchy sites, boosting the effects of holding the Pentarchy and enabling some new actions. We mended the Schism, which gave permanent modifiers on conversion of heretics and monthly legitimacy. And we also got our reclamation events for Antioch and Jerusalem, giving 50% integration progress in both respective provinces. And I built my last local governor in the city of Acre. But then it was back to Italy to complete my final goal, invading from the city where it all began. To give myself some breathing room, I sieged the nearby mountain forts. As long as we held the provinces we controlled, we can continuously reinforce and fight as many Sardinians as it took. And back home, we blockaded the Aegean to stop any sneaky back-sieging. The entire Sardinian army came rushing to Rome with a vengeance. I only sent one stack to deal with them. All those soldiers had my ruler's strategicon in their pockets, ready to die for their rightful Roman land. The first battle was won. Then the second, and then the third, and then there was no Sardinians left. Sardinia then panicked and tried to call all the little minor nations of Europe to try to stop me, but I was inevitable. After the peace deal, I still needed 16 locations to reform Rome, so I made CBs on Milan and Ferrara to get the final amount needed. Luckily, I had the ruthless Grigor as a general, so this would be relatively quick. I declared war on Milan, calling in a massive coalition. But they were disorganized and messy, causing us to capture multiple prisoners. But out of love, I did not kill the prisoners, but rather kept them safe in a sanctuary surrounded by city walls next to Rome. And after I was able to peace out for the locations I needed to reform Rome, I let them go home. Look, they are even leaving one by one, each paying their respect to the two icons of the Archangel Michael. and some even decided to put their arms down and stay in their city wall sanctuary indefinitely. Anyways, with that, I was able to reform the Roman Empire, getting all the associated advances that come with it on top of our unique Byzantium advances. And of course, we still kept our Restore Roman Borders CB. In this scenario, I would just move my capital back to Constantinople, as most of our power is centered around there, and most of Italy is unintegrated. There's so much I did not cover in this AAR, such as Hellenism, the many bureaucracies, going down the Latinatas path with the Latin revival movement, and making reformed legionnaires. For that, you'll have to play Byzantium yourself when EU5's first DLC, The Fate of the Phoenix, comes out on May 6th. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this, as well as a wide variety of Europa Universalis content like historical videos, guides, and game development series.